VoIP Users Conference, the VUC, VoIP and Tel at vuc.me. We could not do this every week without the help of Voxeo Labs. Visit tropo.com, Sangoma.com, makers of some of the finest VoIP hardware you'll ever find. Our hosted PBX by onsip.com. Hardest working guys in VoIP over at e4strategies.com. What would we be without David Frankel and the wideband ZipDX Orchestra, full-featured conference bridge? And thanks to Voxbone, you can call in from 48 cities around the world at local rates to the VUC. And with that, welcome to the VUC. This is a very, very special evening. Hey, Michael White, let me put you on camera here. Give us a big wave. It's my man, Michael White. Hey, Michael, thank you so much for your support of VUC. This is exciting stuff. We've had the people from FreeSWITCH community on several times. They've got a new version of the book. Anthony's going to explain all about that, and then he's going to pass it around to the various core guys. Thanks so much for everybody being here. Anthony, turning it right over to you to tell us about what's happening.
Great. How are you doing today?
Excellent.
Cool. Well, we just released our cookbook, which is the second book that we've written. It took us a lot of work because we actually had to cut the book in half because what we first wanted to do, we were changing stuff while we're writing the book, and we're writing the book versus writing the software that the book is about. You know, some of these books are written by, you know, power users of the various software from Pack Publishing, but you know, us actually writing FreeSWITCH and writing a book about FreeSWITCH at the same time gets rather challenging. So we have this essentially your traditional cookbook format where it's several different things that you didn't think about doing or you wish you knew how to do, or either you're looking for something fun to play with or you have a specific problem that you look through the index and, hey, that's what I want to do, and you look it up. And it's just a whole bunch of just little stuff you can do because you know, one of the core concepts of FreeSWITCH is to make things kind of as creative as possible, to let other developers use the various tools to build what they want, and we have lots of ways to do things. And so a lot of influence from like the Perl mentality, the Apache web hosting days, so just all that same kind of fun creativity is what we're trying to bring. So we worked with Pack Publishing to produce this book that allows people to have a glimpse into some of the stuff you might not have thought about doing. And I had help from everybody on the team really put some kind of hand into doing the book. We got a lot from Michael Collins, who put together all the stuff, did all the testing, did a lot of work on it. And we have the listed authors here, Darren and Ray, and so we also brought some of our other friends with that have some other FreeSWITCH stuff to talk about, but we can get to that later. Maybe we want to talk to Michael Collins a little bit about the work he did on the book.
Michael, you with us?
I do not see him.
I thought he was. He was.
He must have found an error, and he's going back to fix it. He's very careful with the error.
We have 2 of 3 Michaels, but not that one.
Yeah,
okay.
What happened to him? That's right. Well, you have to pass it over to somebody else.
Who do we have here that we could talk with? I see Darren.
There's Mr. Yep. There he is.
I hit the wrong button.
There we go.
Darren also helped write the first book as well as Michael Collins.
Hi. So it's great to be here and talk about FreeSWITCH. Let's see. Let's talk about the book. Well, the book, first of all, takes a tremendous amount more effort than one might assume. It really is pretty insane the amount of work that goes into it. I think the hardest thing about this book versus the first book was a lot about the theory of FreeSWITCH. And what I learned in doing this book is that the theory is a lot easier to write because And this book required a tremendous amount of accuracy, so we'd really have to sit down and lab up the various different recipes to make sure they worked, and then actually look at the C code and go through all of the available options that are there. Because of course the point of this is to document what's in the code, and not all of it's documented, so somebody has to find all that stuff. So I think that's where most of the work came from. I know that for me, every time I sat down, I thought I would crank out a section in 30 minutes, and it usually took about 6 hours. So it was a lot more work than I expected than the previous book. The good news with the book is I think we also vetted a whole bunch of ideas. Like our original spreadsheet of all the things we wanted to write about was quite extensive, and I don't think it would be a bad thing to revise this book at some point and add even more recipes until it becomes like the Uber recipe book. Because there was tons and tons of stuff that we discussed, like billing and carrier failover and stuff like that, and just a lot of features that are available in FreeSWITCH that we could have added to the book, and we simply ran out of time and energy to do it. So I don't think that, I think this will be a never-ending battle to get a final book out that has everything FreeSWITCH can possibly do in it. That's probably actually impossible, so it'll hopefully be most of the things that FreeSWITCH can do. And then maybe tailor it to sort of target audiences. Like some people just want to use FreeSWITCH as a PBX, other people want to use it as a proxy, other people want to use it as a media transcoding device, other people want to use it for PSTN and PRI stuff. And each one of those different sort of functionalities requires a whole different set of recipes. Everything from preventing loops and calls is done differently on each of those strategies to limiting how many users can make calls to fraud detection. I mean, there's so much stuff that you can do, and I think we scratched the surface, but did a pretty good run through on all the different things that FreeSWITCH can at least do. I think the biggest frustration we see in the FreeSWITCH channel, after being in there for a long time, I probably don't answer as many questions as I wish I did anymore, but I used to answer a lot of questions. And they're still the same questions when people get started. They basically hover around, we sort of need examples. And so I think this book is really helpful for giving people some things to play with, because once they start playing with it, you kind of get into a groove where you figure it out, and people kind of get creative with putting the different building blocks together. So that's my take on the book anyway.
Hey Darren, this is Michael. I came in right in the middle of when you were talking, but you kind of said exactly what I was thinking about writing the FreeSWITCH cookbook, and it is there were so many recipes we could do. When it started out, I think Darren, I don't know if you mentioned this or not, we started out with this huge list of things we wanted to do, and I think we were up to 120 recipes and proposed that we wanted to write, and we kind of got into that frame where, since FreeSWITCH is like it's like a power tool, it's like a set of power tools, so it's kind of like writing the skill saw cookbook. Here's a skill saw. Here's what you can do with it. There's so many different things you can do. So what we ended up doing is the recipes that made it into the cookbook were the ones that we did first, because they were like the obvious ones. They were the ones that people were asking this kinds of stuff all of the time. And so what we did was we started with those first, and once we got those done, and then we kind of started we got into the quicksand, as it were, where it's like, okay, should we do this? Should we do that? Well, how many people are really going to be interested in the carrier grade stuff, that Darren works on a lot, or how many people are going to be building a call center? Some would, some people would be interested in that, but what we ended up doing was, going back to packed publishing and figuring out, well, this cookbook, the stuff that we have it's good stuff, and so let's do a mini cookbook. Instead of doing 80 or 100 recipes, let's just take these 40. We'll put them in a cookbook. They're great recipes. It's excellent information, and they're the kinds of things where people will be banging their heads against the wall trying to figure out a problem, and if they had the cookbook, they could save themselves 3 or 4 hours, and then, if you dropped $20 for the ebook or whatever, it was worth it because you saved yourself, a lot of time and energy, and people, and I think people have responded to that. In fact, we got the highest we got, I think, on the packed publishing page was #2 on their bestseller list. We kind of peaked up there. All these silly people with their jQuery and all that kind of stuff, they kind of took over again. Anyway,
Yeah,
thank you.
I
I
think I'll
apologize
also
for
comment.
my
It was kind of
connection
funny,
issues.
Michael. You brought up the sort of sales stuff. I think the first time we were approached by PAC-T, I honestly think nobody over there knew what the heck FreeSWITCH was, and I don't know if there was arm twisting that even got them to publish the first one, but I really got the feeling that they were very surprised at how well it sold. I mean, they came back. Tony, you would know more on this, or Michael, but they came back pretty quickly to try and do more. And I think that's frankly in line with the FreeSWITCH story. There's a lot of people who know, it's other software, and there's a lot of people who've never heard of FreeSWITCH still. And once they hear about it, and then once they read it, they kind of say, I don't believe that it does all this stuff. And then once they try it, they're like, oh my God, it does all this stuff. So I'm not surprised at all that it was very high on the PAC-T selling list. It doesn't surprise me at all. Sorry, I cut you off there a little, Michael.
No worries. So anyway, so the FreeSWITCH cookbook, writing it was very different than writing the first one. Writing the first book was a completely new experience, I think, for all of us, and I enjoyed it mostly, but there were times when I was just pulling my hair out because it was like struggling with words and sentences and what diagrams to put in, what code samples to put in. The second time around is a little bit easier. Some of the mechanical stuff was a little bit easier, but then now it's a cookbook, so it's a bit of a paradigm shift because it's not a tutorial. It's you're trying to present the information as succinctly as possible. And so one of the philosophies of PACT is when you're running a cookbook is you need to present as little information as possible up front at the beginning of the recipe. So you say, okay, here's the recipe, here's how to do it, and you get the absolute minimum that you can do to kind of bootstrap whatever the feature is or whatever it is that you're describing in that particular recipe. And then you go in and you start fleshing that out after they've looked at the minimum. And so they have these lots of little sections that says there's more, and so you start adding all this stuff. So that was kind of a shift from the authoring perspective of instead of holding the reader's hand and walking them through a bunch of stuff, you're saying, okay, here it is up front, the minimum you need, and then you got to figure out what to add and when to add and how to add. So it was a challenge, but it was I think it's something that was useful for us to go through those steps, because now we have that experience under our belt as well, and now we've got 2 different books on FreeSWITCH published, and I have a feeling there's going to be more here at some point, but I think we have some other things on the front burner that we need to work on as well. But I'll be happy to entertain any questions on the book.
There's a good one already from Alok, which is who is the book aimed towards?
That's actually a very good question. The book is actually aimed toward anyone who is trying to learn more about FreeSWITCH. So basically, if you're not a FreeSWITCH expert, then the book is for you. And if you are a FreeSWITCH expert, then the book is still probably for you, because there's probably some recipes that reach into corners that you haven't personally delved into yet. But I think there's only 5, I believe there's 5 chapters in the cookbook. In fact, I got mine handy right here. It's more for the beginner and intermediate crowd, but it is for pretty much anyone who wants to use FreeSWITCH for a number of reasons. If you want to build, say, a PBX with FreeSWITCH, definitely this book is for you, because it talks about a lot of the different things that you're going to have to deal with, whether it's adding users, figuring out voicemail, or you're going to do call recording, or if you're going to handle CDRs, but that's not, and that one isn't a PBX specific item, but it is one thing that you'll run into if you're building a PBX. But if you're going to be doing other things as well, let's say you want to remote control FreeSWITCH. We have a really good chapter on external control. I believe that's chapter 4. External control, which really gets down and dirty with the FreeSWITCH event socket. And one thing that I really liked about this is I kind of went against the grain with PACT, because everything has to be a recipe and how to do it. And I went to them and I basically said, I'm putting in a recipe that is not a traditional recipe on how to do it. And that's the very first recipe under Chapter 4, which is external control. And what I did on there is I wrote a nice little, it's more like a capsule, not just a recipe, on how to use the FSCLI, the FreeSWITCH command line interface, because regardless of your skill level with FreeSWITCH, you must learn how to use the FreeSWITCH command line. And so what I did was I said, well, I kind of dovetailed that because the FSCLI program is actually an event socket program. So if you actually look at the code for fs_cli.c, it's an actual event socket layer. We have an event socket library. We have an event socket library that Tony wrote that abstracts a lot of the stuff that goes on when you're talking to FreeSWITCH over the event socket. So the very first recipe in Chapter 4 under external control, that's something everyone should read, even if you're not going to use the event socket ever again. It's a great way to get yourself up and running and getting familiar with kind of just moving around in the FreeSWITCH command line. And then from there, I go in and say, now if you're in FSCLI and you want to learn about how the FreeSWITCH event system works, well, there's some things that you can do to kind of get your feet wet. You want to see what events look like? Well, here's some commands you can type, and you can see all these different events coming through. Or you want to filter out some events? Well, there's another recipe on that, on how you can filter out and just see the events that you want to see. And so there's different ways of getting involved in FreeSWITCH from that perspective as well. But again, different skill levels, absolutely. So it's aimed at pretty much anybody who's using FreeSWITCH.
Anybody else have any questions?
And if there's no questions about the FreeSWITCH cookbook, that's okay. We have other things that we'd love to talk about as well. But we're definitely here to talk about the FreeSWITCH cookbook as well. Now, I know some people have purchased it because it's it was on the bestseller list for a while. And I think my question to you, to the community in general, is, was the price point appropriate? I kind of put a bug in their ear, because we don't do the business side, but I kind of hinted at the pack guys that, hey, this is going to be a smaller book, so let's make sure that the pricing is appropriate for what we're offering, and if the price is lower, that's okay. Let's just move a lot more units. And for 40 recipe book, I thought the price point was right on, especially if you got it on sale or in one of their little discounts or something like that. But I believe somebody said it was less than $20 they were getting the e-book. And I think the printed copy was $28, I think, like from Amazon. So that's
That seems right on the money to me.
That's a pretty good price point. Yeah, see, that's what I was thinking.
That seems awfully expensive to me for 40 recipes. I should think it would be more, like about $10 or 12 or something like that. I mean, now obviously creativity went into it, so I don't want to
Well, Kovici, since I know you very well, I'll be happy to I'll be happy to assist you with any recipes, or you can review. We'll get you a copy for review.
No, look, no, I'm not saying just for me. I'm just saying that I think you just I'm just making a point.
Well, but one thing to keep in mind too is when you're pricing books, it also depends on how wide the audience is. Now, the FreeSWITCH audience is narrower than, say, the jQuery audience. It just is. It's a more focused product, and it's a more focused project, so there's not going to be as many people using it. So, in that respect, then they're going to need to charge a little bit more because they're just not going to move as many units.
Let me frame this up for you the way I would frame it up, and people are busy, right? Nobody sits around idle. At that price, if you learn one thing that saves you 2 hours, you're making money. So
exactly
I think that's
right.
not a problem.
Yeah, that's always been
exactly right.
It's always been my measure of a book is did I learn? I mean, I think only once in my life did I buy a book. It was like $40 on Solaris, where I learned nothing, and I was so irritated. I wrote them, and the publisher sent me another book free of my choice. That's how bad that book was. But A cookbook, there's always going to be one thing you're going to get out of it.
There will. Personally, I think Chapter 4. If you do anything remote control on FreeSWITCH, Chapter 4 is worth the price of admission because it goes over all the stuff on doing events, and it will save you pulling your hair out. Basically, all the research that I wrote most of those, I think, in Chapter 4. I think some of the other guys threw a few in, but I think Chapter 4 was one of those that I did most of the recipes, and I did all the research, and I did all the code samples. And that's one thing that the co-authors, I kind of took that upon myself. As the co-authors, a lot of them, what it is they have all this knowledge. They're like the subject matter experts, and so they would draft recipes, and then what I would do is I would take them, I'd do a little bit of editing, and then get code samples together, and then I would test them. And so I literally copy, and so I would draft what would actually go off to packed for publishing, and then I would literally copy and paste it out of the Word document because they do it all in Word, and I would paste that into my Emacs or whatever I was on, and I would run it right on my FreeSWITCH on my laptop just to make sure that it worked. And so that did a pretty good job of helping cut out some of the errors. I mean, there a few got in, but mostly it was right on the money. So what I ended up doing is I did a lot of the research and verification kind of work, and then on anything that I wrote, I also had to go back and do all my own research. And so what I was hoping to do was to save the person who's reading it all of that work. You know, I wanted to make sure that, you know, I gathered as much information as possible, presented it as clearly and as succinctly as possible, and then they got their money's worth. Oh, I'm going to figure out how to use events. Great. If I look at Chapter 4, if I can understand most of Chapter 4, then I'm going to be all over it when it comes to doing event socket programming. So.
But wait, there's more. If you act now, you get this free community.
That's true. That's very true. So we have a great community. That's one thing I really like about working with FreeSWITCH. If you don't mind changing directions just for a moment, the FreeSWITCH IRC channel especially is a great place to hang out because they... Oh, hang on. Are you guys seeing... I hooked up a second... I hooked up a second computer, so I don't know if you're kind of seeing me or not, but I can't see you guys. I'm on audio on one computer and sending video on another.
Yeah, I see you on the other computer now.
Okay, so if I do like
there he
Albert,
is. Perfect, excellent.
I think that's what Facebook calls a poke, isn't it?
Exactly. So, anywho, we have a great community. That's one of, in fact, when I first got started with FreeSWITCH, if you don't mind me waxing poetic for a moment, I'd like to go back just to talk about getting into open source communities in general. I started with Asterisk. Asterisk was the first community I ever was involved in terms of open source, because I never knew about open source until I got into my previous job, and then I started learning about it, and I'm like, oh, there's a thing called IRC. Oh, I didn't know that because I never used it in my previous work. And so I started getting on the mailing lists and IRC channels, and I'm like, oh, this is very interesting. And so I kind of learned what a troll is, and you know, and all the netiquette and things like that. And anyway, I ran into some limitations with Asterisk, and then I had heard about FreeSWITCH and from a troll on the Asterisk mailing list. And so, and I thought, oh, I'll poke around and look at that, and I'm like, wow. And I started reading about it, and this is back when FreeSWITCH was like SVN Rev 1000. I mean, it was before the 1.0 release, and I'm like, wow, this is going to be a great project. I can't use it right now, but because I was stuck in the TDM world at the time, and that was before we had OpenZap. But anyway, I'm like, man, this is going to be a great project. And so I kind of kept it in the back of my mind. And next thing you know, they had released OpenZap, and so then I was all over it. And I was using it left and right, and then so I got out my Tormented 2 clone, and I was playing with the ISDN stack that Tony and Mike Jarris wrote, and I kept running into all these problems. And so I would hop on IRC, or I'd send them an email and like, hey, something happened, and they're like, oh, you know what? That was a configuration issue. And so what I would find is I wasn't configuring OpenStat very well, and what I kept doing is I kept doing the dumb things that that the smart people don't think of doing and testing. And so I would find deadlocks and seg faults and stuff from misconfiguring my program. And what happens? They started finding all these little holes and picking them up, and I'm like, hey guys, thank you so much for answering all my questions. And Tony, I remember this clearly. Tony says, no, thank you. He says, right now you're pretty much the only person using OpenZap out in the wild with a PRI. So it's like you're our test case right now. I'm like, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. So we got in there and started working. The next thing you know, Raymond Chandler and I were every week doing the FreeSWITCH conference call that we still do, and we were just kind of volunteering, and one thing led to another, and the next thing you know, it's 3 or 4 or 5 years later, and we're all still here and using FreeSWITCH to make a living. So it's a nice open source success story. So anyway, I appreciate you letting me tell that story. Anyway, we have an awesome community. So if you use FreeSWITCH, you got to be on the mailing list and you got to be an IRC. It's a moral imperative, if I may quote one of my favorite movies. Okay.
So we finally got Michael on screen, and he was pretty much in sync on my end of the universe. I don't know about for you guys, because I'm doing the bridging here over in the other side of the Atlantic. Let's get some more voices in here. Anthony, you want to take it again, or you want to pass it on to somebody? We've got a bunch of people in here, fortunately. I cried and begged and pleaded, which is also known as foreplay in the VoIP world. I didn't put any ethnic group in there. Normally you would, but who else would like to?
Well, this is a
there's
pretty
so
rare
much great
event,
stuff to say. This is a party. We described it right, didn't we, in the beginning? So it's fun.
You
and
did.
Those of you who are listening to this or watching
This is
it,
the adult section now.
it is. And if you were expecting to actually learn something, you may, if you think very carefully about everything that's being said. But in the meantime, we're trying to have a good time as well. Let's go back to Anthony and just see if he has any directions he wants to give us, or we just shoot it over to one of the other guys. Anthony?
Well, there's the obligatory plug for our annual KubeCon conference that I have to make, because it's that time of year again. This is we started ramping up for it, and we're reaching out for speakers, sponsors, and attendees. And this is actually a rare event. It's the longest I've gone without hearing Brian talk, so maybe I can let him talk about that a little bit, since he does such a good job at it.
Yeah. I started off this year really far ahead of the game on KubeCon, and I'm playing catch up now. But I'm pretty much back on track where I need to be, and everything's set up. The hotel, we got all the sponsors. We were still looking for more sponsors. We got some coming in, wrapping up all of the details of that. There's a lot of work involved with doing an event like this. This is our, what are we on, year number 8, Tony?
Yeah.
Year number 8.
Crazy. Every time I think about that, it's like baffling to me.
Yeah, it just, doing this event, it's computer geeks. So, you have all these people that wait to the last second to do everything. So you try your best to get everybody to register early so that you can get your counts correct, you can get all your seating correct, you can pick all of this stuff out ahead of time. So, this year, like I said, I'm just a little bit behind. I'm trying to get caught up now. Mute my phone. People keep calling me. But yeah, we have the calls out for more speakers, attendees. If anybody has any input for anything they would like to see at KubeCon, I was talking to my sister last night, and she wants to have she comes in and helps out. She also runs the open source telephony advancement group, which is OSTAG. But she wants to do a Wii game night at KubeCon, so we may be doing something like that to get everybody there and involved. Does anybody have any questions about KubeCon? What we do there? What kind of talks?
Yeah, one thing, if I may, just this is Michael again. One thing I'd just like to mention on KubeCon, I believe this is going to be my fourth KubeCon, and I've enjoyed every single one of them. And one thing I want you to keep in mind about KubeCon is it's about getting like the telephone geeks all together in one place and letting them interact. And so one of the things that we tell the people who are wanting to speak at the event is that tech is better. The more technical, the more better it is. And so there's, some of the sponsors, they want to be able to plug their product or whatever. We tell them, hey, that's great, but you need to keep the ratio of marketing to technical, in place. So if you want to do 5 minutes of, raw marketing and then 25 minutes of high-tech detailed stuff, that's great. The feedback we get from the people who attend is we love deep technical talks, and not very often do we have speakers talk over the head of like the whole audience. Now, some people are more technical than others, but if you want to get into a nice technical discussion, ClueCon is the place to be. And one of the things we do at ClueCon is we make sure that people have opportunities to connect with each other. And so, yes, we're all in the room, listening to the speaker and doing that, but we've got breaks, we've got lunch, we've got stuff that goes on before and after where people can really, just get together and get one-on-one and interact with one another. And there's a lot of technical discussions that go on. More than a few business deals have been cut at ClueCon, so it's a great place to be. If you're in open source telephony, ClueCon is definitely a place to be, regardless of whether you're using Asterisk, FreeSWITCH, OpenSIPs, Comma Elio, Yate, whatever it is. If you're using open source, you got to be there.
That's one of the things about ClueCon. It is a lot more intimate. You do get FaceTime with people in the field.
FaceTime? Wait a minute.
So you get that. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been to, say, Vaughn. I've been to Vaughn twice when it was running. Every time I left that show, I felt like I had been beat to death. I lost my voice. I usually lose my voice every year at ClueCon from so much talking. So it's and that's rare. I mean, I talk all the time, and I don't shut up. So yeah, it is a draining event. I mean, there's a lot of running around, a lot of things you have to tend to, all of the little minor details of everything. It's fun. I enjoy it. Like I said, this is our 8th year. It's just fun. I really enjoy it, and I hope to see everybody there.
It is. It is a lot of fun, and yes, there's an investment involved in getting to Chicago and getting a hotel and paying for the conference. However, everyone who goes is like, man, this was the best conference of the year. And there are conferences that they have to go to for their jobs, but then they tell their boss, hey, if I can only go to one conference this year, it needs to be ClueCon. Like the other ones, but I love ClueCon, and that's the feedback we're getting, and we want to keep that going. So everyone definitely wants to see you guys there.
About 50% of the people in the audience were new people that had never attended before. We have a large.
I think so. I think. Yeah, you're right. We did have a lot of first timers. Mm-hmm. And they were, and the feedback we got from them was, oh, man, we could have been doing this the whole time. We could have been coming here before. They didn't know about it, or they finally made the decision and pulled the trigger. And so, and last year the calendar was weird. We were in the first week of August, which is kind of our tradition, but other stuff kind of came up at the same time, and there were people who couldn't go for a number of reasons. But it was an oddball year last year, and hopefully we didn't get the same time slot as speech tech, because we have speech tech and Lollapalooza that we're kind of,
Yeah, well, the nice thing about it will be coming down out of Lollapalooza for the week of ClueCon, so that is something else that if people want to go previous and go to Lollapalooza, they would be able to, and then lead right into ClueCon. And that's one thing some people do. So, and it's a lot of good fun there.
Well, the best part about getting such a crowd full of first-time attendees is we really focus on the grassroots type of thing, where we don't really spend money. We don't have any for marketing, since we're just an open source community. So it's all word of mouth and that kind of thing. So our sponsors make it possible to have the conference and stuff, but we don't spend that money trying to just hype or market the conference. We spend it on holding the conference and making fun. So finding all those first-time people just by word of mouth is actually a great accomplishment.
So has anyone here not been to ClueCon before and is considering it, or conversely, have you been to ClueCon and you need some encouragement, or for those of you across the outside the borders of the U.S., if you need like a foreign invite letter or something like that to take to the consul so that you can get your visa and all that kind of stuff, I can handle that. So we'll do everything we can to help you make it to the conference. We'd love to have you out.
Will you pay my visa bill?
Well, yeah, with the surplus, we'll you can have all the surplus.
All right. There's an actual question here, believe it or not, which is from Warren Bowski in IRC, which is, by the way, VUC channel on Freenode.net. He says, I am curious about SIPEX. Is that how that's pronounced?
We don't know how to pronounce it either.
It's very confusing. And your implementation of FreeSWITCH in their product, he says he's never used it. Is FreeSWITCH working well for them? How involved are the SIP yada yada folks in the FreeSWITCH community and giving back? So you know what I'm talking about? I don't. Somebody take it away.
SIPEX is, do you remember SIP Foundry? I don't know if they still exist, but they had the SIPEX was their SIP stack, and they have a whole family of different SIP-related things. And they're actually one of the speakers at our first ClueCon in 2005, and they've gone through a lot over the years, having a lot of their, the members of that group have been employed by various large name companies who have in turn consumed one another, and, they've bounced around in all different incarnations and forks of that stuff. But they've pretty much had a C++ SIP stack and surrounding tools to build a lot of VoIP stuff. Now, the thing about them is they were specifically focused on SIP. Buying into it wholeheartedly, just SIP, the idea where there's no media involved. One of the concepts of SIP when they first made it, which we're slowly proving that it isn't good enough, is that all the devices would do their own media, and SIP is just going to route that everything. They got kind of caught up in the idea that HTTP routing is going to be so awesome, so all we have to do is push the signaling around and everything will talk to each other directly, and who cares if the NAT's in the way or anything. We'll just pretend that's going to go away. And so SIPEX has been, they've made a PBX product that works really well, that uses that kind of stuff, and as long as you're in the right environment, it does work very well. You can get, if you trap all your phones in the same network and stuff, you can have them talking to each other directly and do all kinds of great stuff without ever having to run media through your software, because the minute you do that, you increase the complexity and the load requirements. And that's one of our basic fundamental goals, is to do really well at that specific task. So that's really when they use us. When they need media handling, they're kind of void of that. They try to develop their own, and then they used it for some things. But they found a faster path to getting their stuff to work by using FreeSWITCH for their conferencing and IVR endpoints and that kind of thing. So they kind of sticking with the whole IMS, lots of little pieces way of doing things. They put a FreeSWITCH in with their product, so when calls need to terminate to some kind of application or something that requires media, they use FreeSWITCH for that. They have one server that they control that has dynamic conferences and a bunch of other stuff like that. As far as contributing, we have had, there's different sects that have come off, just like SIR has kind of evolved into multiple products. There's all the different people that have kind of emerged out of the SIPEX project come to ClueCon and talk about the different stuff they're doing. I think Avaya was the last one to have the actual product that they made under them.
Did Avaya end up with, SIPEX went to Nortel, did Avaya end up with the part that came out of Nortel then?
I think they do, although I can't be quoted because I don't know for sure.
Okay.
So I don't want to spread too much FUD. I think I heard they weren't using it for anything, but I can't say that for sure. I do know that it was forked off, and some other people started a what is it called, ASUS or something like that. I think it's called ASUS. It's kind of like a spin-off of that product. I do have people. I don't know which one of the camps they're from, but I get patches once in a while coming on Jira from people that are still doing stuff with it. So although I have a hard time keeping track of who's who, I kind of just lump them all together still, just like I do with the different servers and Common Elio and those things. Like, they're all cool and we hang out. So just more, it's just they have their sect of what they want to work on, and they do good at it, and we kind of synergize that way. So FreeSWITCH does a lot more than just SIP, but when it comes to interacting with SIP, that's what they used it for.
Cool.
And just by the way, both so Daniel from Comma Elio and Bogdan from OpenStips are both going to be at ClueCon again. They're regular attendees, so it's nice. You get to come rub elbows with the actual people who write the software you use. So just thought I'd throw that plug in there.
And they're going to do it like a Jerry Springer show and bring one of them out first and then whisper, what we don't know is that we've also brought the other guy.
2 halls.
They get along very well.
Talk about inside baseball, guys, but that's great. That's perfect. Well, Brian, you haven't said much, so we're going to put it back to you.
I'm still on painkillers somewhat, so I'm a little loopy at this point, but it's all good.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Brian's been through the ringer, so we're going easy on him because of some health challenges, but he's come back, he's bounced back strong, and
yeah, it's all good.
We're getting him slowly. Yeah, he's good.
We haven't
he's
talked
getting
about
himself back.
we haven't talked about ZRTP, how we have that in our tree.
No, we
now.
haven't.
We actually have libZRTP in the FreeSWITCH tree. It's free to use with FreeSWITCH or any derivative of FreeSWITCH. So we have a license.
You don't have to do anything special for that now, either.
No, you don't. It will build if you. Does it build automatically, or do you have to do -- enable?
You do need to -- enable -ZRTP, but you don't have to download anything or run any of the crazy scripts like we used to have to do. It just builds and goes now. We haven't enabled that by default yet, but I think we'll be doing that sometime in the near future.
So could you describe it, once the system's built, then how that appears to an end user?
It's actually transparent. You just need to use a ZRTP-enabled client like GroundWire, or I believe there's some other ones out there. I personally use GroundWire. And with that, then the encryption is transparent end-to-end, just like you would see with any other system using ZRTP. And works quite nice. Mr. Zimmerman has worked with us and a couple of the other FreeSWITCH developers to get that into tree now. We do house now Phil's actual libZRTP with the FreeSWITCH project, so it's the integration is there, and they're working really close with us to make sure that FreeSWITCH is pretty much looks like it's going to be like a de facto standard for ZRTP now. Reference implementation, and then with some of the soft bones out there, it makes it really nice just to get that end-to-end encryption and no fussing with things like SIP TLS and SRTP to make sure you have everything set up right so it's secure. It just, like good old-fashioned Apple product, it just works.
Yeah, and we support both the man in the middle and the end-to-end encryption, where you can just pass the media through FreeSWITCH. All of this requires some configuration to get it exactly how you want it, but it's pretty well documented on how to set this up. I've worked really hard on this from the beginning to get this exactly right. So it's been a task on my list for a while, and now that it's in the tree, other people in the community can assist in testing and perfecting any integration issues that we come across. But I don't think we've come across anything major as far as an integration issue. Now there are some scenarios such as, how do you handle an intended transfer and blind transfers and stuff like that when you have ZRTP involved. And those particular types of scenarios were not laid out very well in the RFC for ZRTP. So there are some changes that have come to the RFC due to those coming to light during our integration process. I don't think Phil had much TBX experience when he first wrote the RFC for ZRTP. He has learned a lot since we've been working with him. So that has required some changes to and clarifications to the RFC to make these things possible. And this all leads up to we're about to tag a stable branch of FreeSWITCH, and that's what Mr. Rice is doing. He is our stable maintainer. He's the one that's going to guard and backport patches for the stable branch as we move forward, and that's coming up very quickly. We have Yum repos we're testing right now, and hopefully soon we'll have a stable release or a stable branch that is nothing but bug fixes.
Oh, I think we just lost your audio there,
Oops,
Brian.
Yeah.
But I'll interject there on the end of Brian. We do have, as Brian was saying, we do have the 1.2 getting ready to branch here shortly. We hope to have RC1 out in short order. And along with that, we are releasing Yum packages. So for your CentOS and RHEL-based boxes, you can add the FreeSWITCH Yum repo and have a stable working set of packages to build off of. Concurrently with that, we do have some other guys that work on the FreeSWITCH project, and they're also building for you guys that are Debian and Ubuntu users. We'll also have the Debian packages, so you can do the good old-fashioned apt-get install FreeSWITCH and go on about your day. No checking out and waiting for everything to build. And we hope to have that pretty soon. We're working hot and heavy on the bug tracker right now to try to get this down, and we're starting to see less real bugs and more people and more feature requests and that sort of stuff coming around now. So that's a very good sign that hopefully pretty soon we'll have this out. We haven't announced a date on when we'll be cutting this yet. We're taking more of the approach of we'll release it when it's ready.
Yeah, it's kind of like a signal-to-noise ratio when the amount of real bugs compared to the amount of feature requests and nitpicky little things. When that ratio gets to a certain point, you're like, oh, okay, it's not really bugs. It's people just, complaining about little things or wanting other new stuff. Then you're, a real stable release is imminent. So that's kind of a good sign, and we're seeing that.
Can you guys
There was
hear me
one
now?
other thing that we were going to... Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Yes, we
Go
can hear you
ahead,
now.
Mr. Solomon. Go ahead.
I was going to say, has anyone here heard about, they're featured, Tony added a couple months ago that has started to get a little bit of traction, but it's not very popular yet, and I have a feeling it's going to be. It's called HT Tappy. I don't know, have we talked about that yet?
No, we have not.
Actually, no.
I call it our HT Tappy. So it's the hypertext telephony API, and so I think Tony can describe it better than I can, but I'll give it a shot. And then, oh wait, go ahead.
Oh, is that the web API thing that with the little server that you have on there?
Well, that depends, because what you just said actually describes more than one thing. So
okay,
I'll give you this. Yeah. Okay. So we literally have mod HT Tappy, and so it's kind of like if you think of Twilio, how you can have a web server that can control a phone call, as an example. What we have is we have HT Tappy. So via hypertext, what you can have is you can have the flow of control of a phone call controlled by a web server. And so we've got a kind of a little syntax, little API syntax that Tony created, and basically what can happen is the flow of the call. What happens is the call can come in, and then basically it's okay. Go to this web server, and it'll tell you what to do. And then the web server can feed it some information, and then it can process. And then if a new decision needs to be made, let's say the caller input something, and well, then it can go hit that web server again and get updated information. So it's distinctly different than, say, what are those ones? I know there's like CCXML or some of these VXML, these ones where you have to like dump like the entire possible outcome of a call. In other words, you have to have the entire dial plan sent the first time. What HTTP lets you do is it lets you be dynamic about it. And so what will happen is you can keep hitting the server. Oh, not sure what to do. Go hit the server. And it's where every time the server sends like a little batch of work, as it were. So you got some commands, and it goes through them. And when it's done, it goes and it pulls the server again. Okay, what do I do next? And then so your server can be intelligent and keep track of what's going on with that call, and you can dynamically do stuff. And it's very clever. And we're hoping to see more people find ways to use that. Again, it's another one of the power tools Tony's come up with, and so we'd like to see people out there using it. I know at least one member of our community is doing some stuff with it, but he's not ready to show it to the world yet. So I'm leaning on him to hurry up so that we can get that out there and get some examples out there. But if Tony or Brian has anything to add, I'd like to have you guys chime in and talk about like the potential or some of the things, maybe some of the problems that we can solve by using HTTP.
Well, the main problem, the easiest problem to solve is when you, say, develop a system either for somebody inside your own organization, or you're trying to develop a service, or any of those kind of things where you want to allow your end users to have some ability to use an external API without worrying about the security of what happens when you let them into your system. So one of the things you can do is offer your customers the ability to point a call at their CGI, and they can write all of it from their side without ever having any interaction with the server directly besides what you allow. So you have permissions on everything that you can do, such as what kind of things they can execute. And by default, all the internal FreeSWITCH applications and things you do in the dial plan are disabled, but you can slowly enable them one by one if you see a need to. It tries to, just with the basic API, give you all the tools you need to do everything from query for digits and transfer the call to another extension. It also allows you to record the call or to record some audio. And after it records it, it posts it to your CGI so you can actually get the file to you. It also exposes a file format plugin that lets you play files that are at remote URLs. It'll download and do cache control on them. So you can, where it asks you if you want to play a file, you just put a URL to a file. And you can essentially build an IVR from remote without ever having to touch the server. You can put all the files in your web tree and the application itself and do everything remotely. So the idea is, again, as always with FreeSWITCH, to try and leverage the several decades of web development and where that's led us with creativity, and to take all those people who have those skills and give them a new adventure with telephony type of stuff.
Yeah, and then the subset of things that they have to learn with the HTTP, like you said, not only can you open things up, granularly in terms of the permissions, but when you look at the actual set of commands that you have with the stock HTTP, it's not overwhelming. And so somebody who's a skilled web developer could look at that and say, okay, you know what, give me a few hours, I can tinker with this, and they could actually sit down and start developing web-based telephony applications very rapidly. And so so people who have, or organizations that have those web dev skills in-house can leverage them to build telephony applications without necessarily going out and hiring a new telephony guy, as it were, for programming. So it's kind of a decreasing the barrier to entry. You can get your feet wet with building telephony apps, and you can do that as an alternative to Twilio if you wanted to. Just another tool in the toolbox that people can use to build things.
And the basic the XML that you return in this case is kind of designed to be hierarchical, where you can use just one small tag that says playback and then the path to a file, and that might be all you need to do. And then from there you can actually expand that playback to have digit bindings, to have it do different things when, like, go to other URLs and stuff, similar to form input on it. The whole thing was kind of to have the same feeling as the CGI, only where the phone is the client, which has been done by lots of people. This is just our interpretation of that same concept. So you can almost write an entire IVR if you fill out every different part of a playback tag. You can collect digits and have it do something when you press each one of them. And we've exposed all the basic things that you want to do, like playback, record, speech detection. If you turn on that, and the default one is configured on the FreeSWITCH machine, you can do, I think we have Festival Light built in. They'll do the detection, and it'll actually post the entire XML blurb of what it detected back to you once it picks something up. So I think it's one of those things that we completed in Christmas time, and we're still getting testing on it and stuff. I think that'll probably be one of the things we talk about at KubeCon this year. I think it'll be pretty solid by then. It's been around for a while now, and
it'll give us some time to actually build some applications that we can show off and show people, hey, here's what it does, here's what it looks like, here's the code. You guys can take it and run and build stuff with it.
Yeah, we debated having a challenge to get someone to build an app with it and do something cool at KubeCon, like let them present it or give them a prize or something. We might actually do that.
Yeah, I think we need to do that.
Yeah, I'm up for that. We can we give them a prize. So anyone else have some questions for us? I see that on the chat channel people are talking about graphical user interfaces. I don't know if you guys want to talk about that in here. It looks like they got it pretty well covered there. But if you guys have any questions, even on GUIs, just
questions about my least favorite topic, which is performance numbers and load testing.
Oh, yeah.
Although I did give 2 extensive presentations the last 2 years that are on Fiddler, if you search for KubeCon, about FreeSWITCH and how you can tune it and that kind of stuff. I'm going to steer away from that this year. I did the 2 years in a row.
Yeah, the whole getting 10,000 call legs up, or is it 20,000? I forget if it was 10,000 calls and 20,000 call legs, but yeah, I like the disclaimer. Don't try this at home. This is a skilled professional. Do not attempt. But yeah, so.
Gosh, what kind of computer will you need for that?
Well, you run an 8-core box, I think, right, with just scads of RAM, and
I think it
was a pretty hefty
12-core box actually.
Oh, maybe it was, because you were using a SIP scenario, right? And it was just cranking up it was close to 1,000 calls a second, right? I mean, the
best I ever did.
It didn't take you very long to get up.
I've pushed it to 60 before, 60,000 at once, where the machine was about to melt. Recommended though. You have to mess with the kernel and set special system parameters and stuff to even have that many threads allowed. And the more there's a point where there's a tipping point with the threads, where if you have too many at once, it starts costing too much memory to be able to have them, because they default it to a well-balanced 32,000 or something, which is plenty, But if you want to get more than 32,000 threads, you have to turn on some things that they cost more RAM, so you need more RAM if you're going to do that. So you need, 20 gigs of RAM and multiple CPUs. But the more CPUs you have, the better you can do. And that's not so crazy anymore, because I have a machine, and I kind of I went overboard on the storage because I wanted to compare it. So I have there's a RAID controller in there, and the RAID controller has two different arrays, and one of them is a mirrored SSD, and the other one is a mirrored IDE or SATA drive. So I've got that, and then it's got 12 CPUs that are hyper-threaded, and it's the last Xeon they made before they started making i6 and i7 and stuff, so it's the same technology, but it's still called the Xeon, because on i6 and i7 up, and they don't have that many cores, and I wanted to have as many cores as possible too, so I put together a machine that I use for development, and it was like $3,000, the normal price of a computer. And that's like a year ago. It's even worse now. I mean, you can get AMD is winning with the number of cores again, but as usual, I predict that Intel's just waiting for them to cut away the trees so they can figure out the best way to do it without wasting money. So I'm sure Intel will catch up with them.
How does FreeSWITCH take advantage of more cores? I mean, because of can each thread be a different core or something?
Yeah, the threads bounce around in the cores, and the more different cores you have, the more actual concurrent things you can do. Unix started out having lots of cores because they were all really weak and they needed to have more to be able to do things, and their goal was to have time-sharing system. And then the 90s came and they decided that the whole Linux thing took off, and everyone was more worried about using commodity hardware and stuff, so we went back to single CPU. So we had Unix running in an environment where there's only one CPU, so even though you are multitasking, you're really only doing one thing at a time, especially with Linux being monolithic and whatever. So when you have more cores, you actually can have more than one thing happening at a time, and that also opens the doors to things you didn't realize. Like a lot of race conditions you'd never know about are masked when you have a single CPU, because you're really never doing two things at once. You can truly do multiple things at a time, and when you have more actual processors, which the two threads can actually do the same thing, and it causes more problems. I remember the first time, even after doing multi-core stuff, when we got our hands on an 8-core machine when they were first becoming available, I found 10 race conditions in one day that I never knew were there, because it wasn't powerful enough to be fast enough to create them. But you have these, the kernel is doing context switching between the different tasks, and it tries to divide it over the processors you have. And when you turn on the real-time scheduling in Linux, which we do by default if we detect that you have more than one CPU, we can boost up the priority of the threads that are most important in the software, and then you have essentially a juggling act where you try and make sure that all the different I/O that's happening from your RTP sessions are being serviced within the time frame that the packet interval that they're scheduled for, and having, from the kernel's perspective, trying to deliver focus to each one of those at the time that they want is what usually pushes the most on the machine. So the more cores you have, the more things it can do at a time. So it drastically improves the performance when you add more cores, because you can split apart the roles, and so you can withstand a lot more context switching in a multi-core one than you can on a single. So you'll run out of stuff fast.
Does that scale linearly not only across cores but also across CPUs?
Yes, because you have essentially you have, let's say you're making a whole bunch of calls, like a simple scenario, if they're all calling to play a file, streaming audio and then mirroring it back, so you have like a two-way RTP session for however many calls you have set up. So our design is to use a thread per leg So whether if you're in a bridge, you have 2 legs. If you're just calling to talk to some kind of application or play a file in a single-legged scenario, then you only have 1. So each one of those legs lives in its own thread, and each one of those threads is dedicated to that particular connection to the call, like the SIP call. Your SIP stack is going to be independently listening for, the problem is you have to serialize that as well because you have all these different SIP messages coming in. It's kind of like traffic direction. Like the things the kernel does are kind of mimicked in user space and a lot of different stuff, like in the SIP stack itself and in FreeSWITCH, because you have a kind of a single point of entry for some of the things like the call setups, and then we try and distribute them by launching different threads and running them all separately. And each one of the threads is in turn established with the operating system, so the kernel picks which one. So you have all the different cores, whether they're on the same physical CPU or not, they're going to be delivering the different, when it comes in and out of needing to do something. And what we try and do is, when possible, we use timers, which is a concept we have where you can register your own timer. You can use the ones we have. Essentially, the default one is built in, especially on the newer kernel where you have the timer FD. We have a single instance of that does 1 kilohertz timing to try and find the, well, it does 1 if it gets down to it. I think actually by default now we turn that off. We go at 20. We run at 20 in the single thread. And then if you do something like need a 30 millisecond call, we'll go down to 10 so we can do 20, 30. So we try and run it as slow as we can, but depending on, in real time, if you try and make a different call that uses a time slice that's smaller than what we're doing, we speed it up. And that single thread tries to do conditional broadcasting to all the other threads. So essentially, all the different calls that are doing I/O on the audio are blocking on a conditional mutex, and the single time of thread broadcasts all of them to wake up at the time that they wanted to wake. They were told to. So say it's a 20 millisecond call, it tries to keep accurate 20 millisecond timer, and then it's RTP and it's over UDP. So when the time comes, if the audio is there, we take it. Otherwise, we assume that it's not going to be there, and we make up for it. So internally, all of our threads are churning at the interval that you set the call up at, regardless if the audio is coming in or not. So you either get timeouts or you get an audio. If the audio is there, we return it. And so all those things are happening independently, each of the threads, and we rely on the kernel to bounce this around and give us the best scheduling. So that's why we go into the real-time scheduler, which allows you to put threads in different priorities, and then also distributes them in a round-robin fashion. Because essentially, once you pump up full attack on the machine, if you're calling hundreds of calls a second, doing something for a certain amount of time, hanging up, you're getting kind of a repetitive people in line. It's kind of like that video game Tapper from the 80s, where you like give the beer to the different customers.
I love it.
So do we have anything else to cover, Mr. Collins? I think we covered our agenda.
I think we covered everything that we were hoping to talk about, and we've certainly plugged everything we wanted to plug. But again, we're available for questions. So if the community here has questions, we're open to what you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, I have to say our community is pretty awesome.
I'll drink to that.
Well, they all stepped up and helped donate money when I was in the hospital, so it was really awesome of them.
Speaking of community, did you want to plug any of the commercial entities that are using FreeSWITCH?
I can think of one that I would like to plug, and
obvious one.
Some, go ahead. The most obvious one would be Kudatel. Because someone, here, I'll do it. Here, Kudatel.com. That's the home base for the project that we're working on. But yes, we're developing the CookBook communication server, and yes, it's using FreeSWITch. FreeSWITch is the Hemi inside the device, but it's got an awesome GUI and it does all sorts of cool stuff. So yeah, that's the big plug. So if you're looking at something for your enterprise and you need something that you just throw in a rack and turn it on, you have a GUI, and then you can have your system admin guy, run the phone system. That's a great option for you.
Open source is nice,
One
but
of the
making a living is nice too.
Yes,
Yes, exactly.
There's a little bit of a trade-off there. I mean, you have to do both.
Yep.
And it's a balancing act. And the nice thing about FreeSWITch and the CookBook is there is absolutely no changes in the CookBook that aren't in the open source. It's the exact same thing. There's nothing special there.
Yeah, there's no dual licensing, no
special
modules,
no everything that's in our open source is exactly what we use in CookBook.
Yep. So I can't tell you how many times that the guys have needed something in FreeSWITch. They needed FreeSWITch to be able to do something for CookBook, so they put it in FreeSWITch, and then that went into tree, and then so now it's in the main FreeSWITch repo. So every time the CookBook needs something from FreeSWITch, whatever that is, it becomes available to the world, to anyone using FreeSWITch. So.
Right. I call it making Lego bricks, because that's basically what FreeSWITch is a nice Lego set for telephony.
It absolutely is.
I'm muting.
And somebody else using the Lego bricks? No problem. Another good use of the Lego bricks is UMA. Have you guys heard of UMA? I think you just go to UMA.com.
Yeah, in fact, I'm trying to get UMA to come talk to us.
Excellent.
FreeSWITch actually runs on the device.
Yes, so if you get a little UMA box, I wish we had a FreeSWITch inside sticker like Intel does, or a FreeSWITch, a lightning bolt powered by FreeSWITch, because it's FreeSWITch on the inside of those little guys, and they got FreeSWITch on their back end as well, on their network, and they're awesome. I finally convinced my wife to cut ties with the landline, and she just yesterday she came up to me and she said, and I can't tell you how many times she said this to me. She goes, "So Michael, we really aren't going to have that $43 phone bill from AT&T each month." I'm like, "No, sweetie, we are not. I promise. It's gone. Don't have to pay the money anymore." So, and she's loving it because they have an awesome little control panel, and she set it up so that calls that come to our home number. We ported our home number over to UMA, and then she went in there, and she just once I pointed her at it, she was just all over it, like a bulldog on a bone, man. She was just
figured it all out
around and setting stuff up.
And
she set up our she set up our inbound calls to our home number to ring her cell phone simultaneously. So she's got it covered. Now she doesn't have to go running for a phone. She can just wait for the call to hit her cell phone 2 seconds after it hits the home phone, and she's good.
So of course, I find the appeal that that between UMA users they do wideband calling, which is a nice public exposure of wideband in a cost-effective way. And I believe that I don't know this for a fact, but I believe that their little Tello handset is actually manufactured by Gigaset.
Oh, I don't know if it's manufactured by. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump the gun. I thought you were going to say that it's HD, and yes, it is. I don't know if it's manufactured by Gigaset, but yeah, I was talking to Kevin Snow a couple weeks ago, and he said that the new ones, I think they're going to be out this summer. They're doing new handsets, and they're going to support 4 handsets, and he said there's only so much spectrum in the air between the handset and the base. So, like, if you have 2 handsets, you can have 2 handsets both be on HD. But if the third one comes on, that one can't be in HD. There's just not enough bandwidth in the air. But
they have very very little bandwidth on the DECT in the U.S. to deal with. I think it's like is it 5 or 10? It's not 10 megahertz. I think it's like 5, isn't it?
Yeah, and I know they're doing. I think they're doing some kind of channel bonding to pass HD over it.
Yeah.
So anyway, so yeah, so if you're gonna have a party line at your house, then only 2 people can be in HD on that at the same time. But still, it's a far cry from where we are now. So that's another commercial entity I know that's using FreeSWITCH inside, and it's one of those between when you're involved in a project. I think Tony probably more than any of us understands what this feels like. But when you get involved with the project, or if you literally open up a text editor and start typing, and then several years later, what you started typing is turned into a product or a project that is now included in a product, and you go and you're going to the airport and you see the Kudatel on a advertisement in the airport, or you hear about it on the radio, or you see UMA on a commercial. You kind of get that. I don't know if you get a warm fuzzy, or just like, it's just, I don't know. It's very satisfying to see something that you helped build, or in Tony's case, that you architected and built from the ground up, and it's now being used by thousands, perhaps millions of people in various products. It's a great feeling. Kind of validates all the hard work that you put in.
Actually, as it happens, our MP3 stream is FreeSWITCH Mod Conference software conference module. I guess our friend Thomas in Austria has dialed in using FreeSWITCH, and that's how we're talking to the IceCast server.
Oh, cool.
So we'll put it in. We'll put a FreeSWITCH inside stick or something.
So anyway, yeah. So we love hearing about how FreeSWITCH is used. Whether it's commercial, I mean, it's nice to hear about your products or projects being used in commercial products, but we also just like hearing about what people are doing with FreeSWITCH. So it's kind of interesting just to hear what people do, because it's like you build a set of tools, or like Brian says, Lego bricks, and you see what people build with them. And I think Larry Wall from Perl, of Perl fame, and he said, wasn't his famous quote, that the killer app is going to be somebody we've never heard of doing something we never thought of with what we built. And so that's kind of like when you build something that is used to build other things. So I think that might happen with us. You may see somebody just come up with a completely off-the-wall, killer, awesome thing, and UMA may be that thing, or it could be something else. But it's kind of interesting to put those tools out there and then see what people do with them. It's kind of fun.
See if there's any further questions on IRC or any place. Lots of people called in. If you want to voice your question, you'd be more than welcome to do so. Somebody's got a nice hum going here. Let's see if I can figure out where that's coming from.
Hello. Actually, I've got a question, or let's say a message. Let's say just to follow up to the previous speaker about the things which probably nobody has thought of or actually implemented it so far. My name is Stanislav. I'm also some bug reporter, quite active bug reporter on FreeSWITCH.
Welcome to the conference, Stanislav.
Thank you. So basically, what I've done is hotline solution for a small support team. So I had a support contract where I needed to set up some on-call service, basically, where the customer would call in, and then the call would be directed to the on-call engineer. I didn't want to do manual switchover, because most of small teams, they just buy a mobile phone and basically do the call redirection every Monday. And my support team is distributed across different countries, so it's not anymore efficient with a mobile phone. And with FreeSWITCH, I actually implemented an application which allows my colleagues to maintain their on-call schedule autonomously. So they call in, and then through the IVR they log in and basically manage the redirection, and then call comes to them on all of their numbers. Also, this cool feature for call confirmation, where basically you have to confirm incoming call with the digit That is an awesome feature because now I can direct these hotline calls to people's personal mobile phones.
Exactly. You don't have to worry about their voicemail picking up. Yeah.
Exactly. Voicemail or operator message when people are not available. I don't want my customer to hear the voice in foreign local language that this phone is not available. So this feature is pretty cool. I basically publish as much as possible openly so that somebody else can do the same thing. And I couldn't find anything because my first approach was to find something which works for me. I couldn't find anything that is available out of the box or is offered as a service, so I had to build myself, and that's how I learned FreeSWITCH actually. So
excellent.
That is a use case. This is use case which basically is pretty typical for small support teams, but nobody probably invested enough time to actually build something. Well, I had my time to invest it, and basically, that's the awesome sort of.
It's nice. It's nice to hear that. Well, it's nice to hear that you were able to invest the time and the energy into building that, and then being willing to share it with the rest of the world is also very cool. So we appreciate that. I mean, we know what it's like to give back. I mean, especially Tony. It's like I can't tell you how many times Tony says, like, I've donated like I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of lines of code at FreeSWITCH and given it to the world, and and it's like, and then some people are stingy about giving back, and it's like, it's great. It's great that you take something and build a solution that worked for you, and then say, hey, if anyone else wants to check it out, to let them do it as well. So do you have a place where you're hosting that, or are you going to set up like a Git repo or a GitHub or something, or what do you do?
Well, basically, I push everything to my blog. It's txlab.wordpress.com, and also on Google Plus. I also announce all stuff. So basically, it's like mini cookbook. It's more or less the cookbook that with all small things that I basically discover or build. I try to put it in this blog. I'll send you a link actually later.
Yeah, go
basically.
for it.
I think I've got some of your email addresses.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And there's actually another application which I didn't implement yet, but I've seen it in action at some point. One with the insurance companies that basically I call in to the call center. All the agents were busy, and then the system actually asked me if this is my number, and basically if somebody can call me back. And then, so basically it hung up. I don't have to listen to all this music on hold anymore. And then I got a call back. So this is the awesome feature for call centers, which is obviously easy to implement with FreeSWITCH. And I wonder why nobody is doing it. So yeah, there are lots of use cases with new opportunities, let's say, or application ways of building applications, let's say, with this open source software. And it is affordable also because before, I don't know, like 5 or 7 years ago, things that are free now would cost you a fortune, and they wouldn't actually work.
Yes, exactly. So I think everyone here, well, I don't know if everyone here, but most of the people here probably are proponents of the open source way, whether it's truly quote unquote free software or open source software, depending on your definition, and there's some nuances there. But I think we all can agree that if you can see the source code, then that gives you some level of confidence that what you're using is good stuff. When you use proprietary stuff, it's like, yeah, I guess it's okay, or maybe it works, or just because you used it a lot that it works. But when somebody's confident enough to release their source code, then you know that they are really, either they have no shame, or they're not embarrassed when they should be, or they just they have confidence that what they've written is good, and that they're willing to let other people check it out and build upon it or make comments and so forth. So absolutely. Very cool.
Okay, we have an actual question. We should probably let everybody go soon, but here's a question that I don't know how you're going to answer this. And the question is, how would you compare FreeSWITCH to Asterisk?
Oh, wow, this is one of
Deep,
those...
deep question.
This is one of those dangerous questions because they're so... I don't know, they're different enough that it's not an apples-to-apples comparison. But what I'd like to do, I would like to let Tony handle this because he is probably the one person on the planet who's got knowledge of both. Oh, yeah, Node 117, Brian says. Yeah, that's a wrap-up. But if Tony wants to chime in on this briefly, because I think we're pretty much out of time, but
we're never out of time. We're never out of time.
Well, you may not be.
Especially for you guys. No, I know people want to get going. And seriously, I appreciate you attacking the question from the spirit. Well, I don't actually know. Maybe that was a mean spirit. But I think the question is a good one for someone who absolutely doesn't know anything about the history of it. And I'm counting on you.
Okay, well,
Tony, well, go ahead if you want to. But I was going to say, Tony,
let me give you...
count on you guys to do it in a way that is the most politically correct. Whatever, you know.
Well, there's two things. First of all, what was stated there in the channel Node 117, that's kind of the original thing that Tony wrote. But if you get the original FreeSWITCH book, in fact, I'll hold up. You can see this book here.
Right.
In appendix, I think it's Appendix B, Tony writes all about this, and he writes kind of a nice little story about how things were going, and it's called The History of FreeSWITCH, but in there he mentions something very important, that the history of FreeSWITCH requires telling some history about his involvement in Asterisk, because that's where he got initially involved in doing things like telephony and so forth. So, but he can give you the, you know, once you give the Reader's Digest version of differences between FreeSWITCH and Asterisk, I'll let him do that. But I encourage the individual who asked the question to get the original FreeSWITCH 106 book, the bridge book as we like to call it because of the picture on the cover. And if he reads that and he reads Node 117, I think he's going to have a really good idea of how FreeSWITCH compares to Asterisk. But I'll hand it over to Tony if he's got any specific comments here.
Well, I can start. The easy way to answer that question is the things that has the most in common with Asterisk are the ideas that I actually put into Asterisk as well that were kind of just beginning at the time. I spent a lot of time working on Asterisk, and I had a lot of different concepts in my head that I was trying to work out, and introduced several different features into Asterisk that when I went to make FreeSWITCH I wanted to keep, and they came out similar and maybe went off into more of a tangent than they did. Some of the big ones are in Asterisk you have these dial plan functions, I think they call them, or you know, the idea where there was a function that was in your dial plan that would have kind of like return something. That was something I worked on that I started in Asterisk and kind of evolved into our FreeSWITCH API that we have now. I'd say our event socket is really kind of my response to the Asterisk Manager stuff. It was one of the first things I tried using when I was new to Asterisk, and I always had certain kind of wish list of what I wanted it to do. It was kind of hard to push in. I made a lot of different changes into the one in Asterisk as you see it now, but when I had my chance to make my own rendition of it, I guess that's where that came from. There is you know, the conferencing module. I tried making a conference module for Asterisk. In fact, we have on our website up in the left corner, there's like an Asterisk apps thing that it's a collection of all the different out-of-tree stuff that I made for Asterisk that kind of is the basis for some of the things we have now. Some of it's the same. Some of it kind of evolved even further. I mean, obviously it compares in the way that it's got the same core goal as to be a user space software that can support multiple technologies. I think that in FreeSWITCH we take modularity a step further. It's not only the thought of having modular mean that you can have modules, but really you can set up sort of you can have an environment where you use FreeSWITCH 5 different times in the setup, all on different machines configured separately as if it was completely different jobs. So, you know, you can use it as an application server and as a routing system and, you know, SBC type of thing all kind of together, like on different instances of it. So you could do things like if you have a conferencing server and you want to do something like allow people to call in over Skype, you can set up a second copy of FreeSWITCH that's got basic config to listen for Skype and turn it into SIP and push it over to the central one where you're running your conferencing. And so I have, like I was saying earlier, kind of like a heavy influence from the whole Apache web hosting days. That's what I did for like a really long time. So I really loved playing with Apache. It was fun. Like you'd find a new module somewhere and like think of crazy stuff you can do and hook it up together and use it different ways. And so a lot of the influence comes from there. So it's kind of like my rendition of so my influence from Asterisk kind of mixed with my influence from Apache is kind of what you get. That's where you get FreeSWITCH. So I know everyone likes to think that we have some kind of evil war going on with them or something, but we don't. Even, you know, we have community members in common all the time, and, you know, none of that stuff's really, there's no competition to make free software. So a lot of us, I mean, we have people right now using both together all the time, and, you know, we've been primary Asterisk developers in the past, and we've experienced things that we, you know, wish we could improve on it, and here and there we'll see that still there, and like, oh, that problem, I remember that one. You know, we used to have the bug numbers memorized. But, you know, it's almost kind of, it's important that we just continue the development of open source voice stuff, because there's discussions still going around. I saw one, it won't go away really, it's on LinkedIn, about like what's taking so long to adopt voice over IP and stuff, and there's still people clinging to TDM, and it's kind of does us no good to bicker within open source, because we're all tools to try and revolutionize everything. So so I'm not too scared of that question, how we compare to Asterisk, because I'm not, like, I have, like, a really list of critical issues I have with it as far as architecture and stuff, but that's just the way I felt about it and what kind of the reasons I took to start my project. But it's not a personal kind of thing. It's just, you know.
Yeah, Tony's not out there evangelizing about, you know, trying to force his viewpoint down everyone's throat. He's just, yeah, he produced the code, and it's there for you to download and try it, and if you like it, you like it. So,
and all of a sudden, next thing you know, it's 7 years.
Yeah, exactly.
But we've had a steady movement of open source voice for going on 10, 12, 15 years now. We had, in, you know, the late 90s, there's the whole OpenH223 that kind of kickstarted everything, and Asterisk came around in 1999, and, you know, we're glad that we can have our little corner of the universe, and we work really closely with all the other open source voice projects. We have regular interactions with the different SIP router people, and we were talking about SIPX before, and so we're hoping that we can push it forward even more now that we have this new era with the whole WebRTC, and we want to see what we can do with that, and we think we can probably do some pretty cool stuff. You guys had them on here recently, I believe.
One of the reasons I wanted to do this call precisely was to let people see the faces behind FreeSWITCH, and we've been able to do that. They've been able to hear the voices, and let's make sure that any contact information is in front of everybody. I'm just going to take a wild guess and say that we'd probably be looking at FreeSWITCH.org as a main site. Is that right?
Correct.
So I win the cigar there. Anything else? There's got to be a contact form or whatever. What do you want to throw out there as far as people contacting you? Obviously the site, FreeSWITCH, I hope you can all spell that, .org, main site.
And that site leads to many of we have a phone number and stuff on there if anyone wants to call us. And just like all old school open source developers, we hang out in IRC, just like you
Great
guys
IRC channel.
Over in the FreeSWITCH channel.
Great IRC channel, yeah. Got hundreds of people in there all the time, and it was a lot of fun. People were helping everybody, so I have nothing but good things to say. They put up with my spam for half an hour about getting people to come to this thing. But excellent, yeah. No, and it worked. As you see, we dragged at least 4 of you in here.
Yeah, and we brought a few. We brought a few with us. We've been for the past few weeks on our Wednesday weekly conference call. We've been telling people, hey, let's all go join VUC. It's a cool place. There's a lot of cool people there, and it's a broader based audience. With because we're over here on Wednesdays, we're all focused on FreeSWITCH, right? So let's come over here. There's a bigger world. We can talk to other people as well, and so we've done that, and a lot of our people said, hey, I'm going to start hanging out there too. So I'm like, great, excellent. That's 2 things a week you have to do, 2 conference calls.
That's very cool. And by the way, the details on that, it's Wednesday. Well, I guess that's on the site, freeswitch.org, that they're going to get into that conference call.
Yeah, if you go to and the wiki at freeswitch.org as well has like all the documentation. It's a typical wiki. It's like the internet. It's a microcosm of the internet. There's a ton of information, but you need Google to find what you're looking for. So we're working on it, trying to improve it. And but again, it's a wiki, so it is what it is. But yes, there's a ton of information available on FreeSWITCH, and on the front page of the wiki is the link to the weekly conference call, and then we have all of their past conference calls that are logged, and we got recordings and all that kind of good stuff.
So we only aspire to be as cool as your conference with the fancy video and all the music and stuff. We can't get that. We want that, but we're humble at this point. We're still working towards that kind of thing.
Well, what I would say is let's do this again, guys. Anytime you have anything you want to do, you're always welcome, all of you, on the conference, first of all. But also, if you want to do a video thing, and if you had things to show, like we could have maybe paged through the book. Maybe I should have paid more attention to doing that, to do a look inside and stuff like that. But anything like that you want to do, don't hesitate. I just want to thank everybody.
Well, here's what it looks like inside. Is that okay?
Wait a minute, let me zoom in.
Yeah, we can zoom in.
No, I can't.
Right.
I'm lying. I can't zoom in.
This is my favorite chance. Getting familiar with the FSCLA. So
there you go.
Worth the price of admission.
Absolutely.
In fact, that part's so good that you guys should be hitting our PayPals with tips.
Writing those books is harder than writing a code, I'll tell you that.
Well, wait a minute. I'm getting some, our friend Delphi World, a friend of both of our IRC channels, is telling me that Tony plays guitar. You know, Tony, I've been playing guitar for 50 years, and I've toured and stuff. But I'm playing bass now, so you and I will do a duet next time.
Well, we always bring instruments to
CookCon. Yeah, exactly. In Chicago,
everybody brings their instruments, and then that's the nighttime version of the conference every year.
One of these days, if I'm anywhere in the neighborhood.
Yeah, you got to come. The first time I went, it was in somebody's hotel room, but then they had so many people, they had to finally, start finding an actual room, like a bigger place for everyone to hang out. So yes, I think Tony will break out his harmonica as well.
There's actually a video on YouTube about that. I mean, you could go look it up.
There is, actually.
That was also the first year you were there. That was in the hotel room with Matt Williams, Antonio and harmonica.
Yep.
That was at the Hilton Garden Inn in Chicago.
Yeah, with the kegs on the luggage
track. We decided to give everybody like a beer and pizza night after the conference, and then that particular hotel, one of the things we learned to avoid by making sure it's in our contract, but at the time we haven't learned this lesson yet, told us, oh, we need the room for the night. We're going to set it back up for your stuff tomorrow, but you need to get out of here right now. And we're sitting here with 2 half barrels and like 10
no, this
and we're like, well,
and then it clears out.
Yeah, I guess we're going to go into somebody's room with all of it. So, you know, we took 2 half barrels and like 10 pizzas into one of the little hotel rooms. And that's where that whole thing came from.
So we plan ahead now. We actually have the space.
After 8 years, we've gotten pretty good at it. It took a while, but...
Alrighty, well, thanks again, everybody. We're going to play a little music to avoid me having to edit. So want to thank everybody. Go to freeswitch.org and stay with us. We'll be back in a second with the mature audiences only version. Thanks for joining us on the VoIP Users Conference, the VUC, or VoIP and Tell. Every Friday, 12 noon Eastern Time. And also, we have another list of people to thank, sponsors, such as Voxale Labs. Their great initiatives with Phono.com, SMSified.com, Tropo.com. Sangoma is well known for high-quality hardware and software in the VoIP space. OnSIP, check out their new look and their new offer at onsip.com. That's our host at PBX, by the way. E4strategies.com. Michael White is the hardest working guy in VoIP. Give them a call. Get a quote if you're looking for something. And of course, ZipDX, thank you so much, David Frankel, for your help. It's been about 3 years now of the 6th year that we're starting for the VUC. And Voxphone, thank you for providing about 48 dial-ins at local rates for people in countries in the world where they can't use VoIP for some reason. See you next week.